Okay, so metta is the Pali word for loving kindness. It's got two T's in it. And if you've ever been to the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts or seen our literature, know that it's a large brick building with white pillars and has this word metta up above. We bought the property in 1976 from the Catholic Church. It was a novitiate, and it was run by the Fathers of the Blessed Sacrament, which is what it said up above the doorway, Fathers of the Blessed Sacrament. So once we bought it and moved in, we asked somebody to get up on a very tall ladder and rearrange the letters to say something about us. So they came up with metta, M-E-T-T-A. And we had a big debate. It's not an English word. No one will understand it. Let's replace it. But metta prevailed, I'm happy to say, because it's what I wanted to see. And I just like that somebody calls for directions. We can say, it's a large brick building with white pillars, and it's got this word up above, metta. And then they usually say, what does that mean? And we get to say that means love, or that means loving kindness. And it's a nice conversation. Loving kindness is the common translation of metta. It literally means friendliness or friendship. I use loving kindness, of course, because it's so standard. Although I've had scholars and translators say to me, stop being so cute about it. Just say love. You mean love. My concern about loving kindness is that it's an unusual term. We don't necessarily use it in casual conversation. So does that remove it from the considerations of day-to-day life? Love is very complex. Like, what does that mean? We use it in so many different ways. I try not to use friendship because one of the aspects of loving kindness, of metta, is that it's a heart state. It's not a demand for a certain kind of action. Like when I think of friendliness, I think of somebody I want to spend time with. But that actually may not be true for the person you've been working on developing metta for. There's the lack of hatred in one's heart, the wish that somebody maybe could see through their bias, whatever it might be, in the sense of wishing them well. But that doesn't mean you're going to say, let's go have dinner, or let's go somewhere together. Maybe it's not safe. Maybe it's not smart. There's always a balance between metta for someone else and metta for ourselves. And there's a balance between metta and compassion and wisdom, which is really where equanimity comes in. So the term I try to use for metta is connection. It's a profound sense of connection, first of all, with ourselves and with others. It doesn't mean you like somebody. It doesn't mean you're going to want to spend any time with them. But it's like this bone deep realization that our lives have something to do with one another, that we live in an interconnected universe, that all beings do want to be happy, and not just in a superficial sense of happiness, but a sense of belonging, a sense of finding a home somewhere in this body, in this mind, with one another on this earth. Everybody wants to be happy. And it's because of the force of ignorance that we create so much suffering for ourselves and others. And it's all of us, and so we can relate differently, but that doesn't mean we don't react, that we don't take action, that we don't care, that we don't try to make a difference. We do. But the motivation perhaps doesn't need to be such an utter sense of separation or real hatred and fear, actually. So motivated differently, more from this space of connection, we take action. So that's the first and kind of foundational heart space that we talk about cultivating. They come in a package of four, known as the four brahmavihārās. Brahma meaning sublime or heavenly, or one translation I heard of it that I liked a lot was the word best. Vihara means dwelling or abiding or home. So taken together, these four states are said to form our best home. The first, and like any home, we're not there all the time, we leave, but when we get back home, there should be a certain feeling of relaxation, of lack of pretense. We don't have to pretend anything, we're home. Being at ease, having ease of heart, being natural. So these four qualities are said to form our best home. The first being loving kindness, and that's sort of the foundational one. The second is compassion. So if metta is the sense of, somebody suggesting in the chat, goodwill or friendliness rather than friendship, that's good. Metta is goodwill or friendliness or connection with somebody, or with the world and with oneself. Then compassion is defined as, it's got a two-part definition. First part is the trembling or the quivering of the heart in response to seeing pain or suffering. So first of all, rather than being, loving kindness and compassion are very close, but they're also a little different. So it's like a different flavor. So one of the things with compassion is that instead of resting on this awareness of everybody wanting to be happy, we're resting on an awareness of how vulnerable we all are. It's not that we all suffer to the same degree, because clearly we don't. But the fragility of life, the vulnerability, I mean, just look at these last 2 years, We all do share that. And so compassion, sometimes we think of compassion as this kind of hierarchical state, like I, who's so great, and whose life is so together, and whose life can never fall apart. I'm looking at you way down there, whose life has fallen apart. And I'm just kind of throwing this little crumb of kindness down to you. And my life could never do that. My life is all set. Well, clearly that's not true, because we never know. And so it's much more a kind of equalized state. The trembling or the quivering of the heart in response to seeing pain or suffering. Then the second part is, it's a movement of the heart toward, to see if we can be of help. Now notice that unlike certain, like the Western, idea of compassion, suffer with, it's a movement toward, not into, to burn up ourselves in the pain. It's a movement toward, to see if we can be of help, not insisting we're going to fix it according to our timetable, like it's all going to be resolved by Tuesday, right? If we can be of help, it implies boundaries, wisdom, that's the equanimity, all kinds of balance between compassion for others and compassion for ourselves, balance between that compassionate urge and wisdom. I'm not in charge of the universe. That is a very sad truth. I once said in front of this group, I think if only I were in charge of the universe, it would be a lot better world. And someone in the group just challenged me. They said, "Are you sure?" I thought about it and I responded, "I am really sure." But you know what? It's not to be. And there's so many times we wish that wasn't true, right? You have a friend who's really struggling and you would do anything to get hold of a chip to implant in their brain with you holding the remote control. And you can just point it and say, "Cheer up. Tomorrow could be a better day." Life's not like that. It doesn't give us that so far, right? Um, and so we need wisdom. We need to understand there are limits and that there's also mystery in any kind of unfolding. You try to help somebody and maybe it doesn't seem to go anywhere. And sometimes a long time later, that person will get in touch and say something like, you gave me that book and it didn't really mean anything to me at that time, but now I'm in this whole other circumstance and I picked up the book and it was perfect. And I think, well, look at that, you can't always tell that it's going to happen by Tuesday or, how somebody might influence somebody else, might influence somebody else. Life is like that. Somebody put in the chat, she came to a retreat I taught at Gaia House years ago, and then ended up living and working there and didn't leave Devon for 20 years, so life is kind of mysterious also, and we do everything we can to try to make a positive difference, and there needs to be a kind of letting go. Okay, so that two-part definition of compassion, the movement of the heart, the trembling of the heart, and then the movement toward, to see if we can be of help. That first part is really about empathy. The second part is compassion, and it implies a lot about balance. The third of the qualities is sympathetic joy, which means joy in the happiness of others. Rather than when witnessing someone's success or good fortune, falling sway to the voice that so often arises in our minds that says, "Ooh, I wish you had a little bit less going for you right now." It doesn't have to be that you lose everything, but if the light could just dim a bit, I'd feel better. But instead of that, you're actually happy with someone else's happiness. No, some people actually have this characteristic naturally. I mean, I know people like that. I bet you do. Something good happens for you, and they're so happy for you. And it's so beautiful. For most of us, it is not that natural. It's actually a training because it involves challenging a lot of assumptions we make, consciously or unconsciously. That happiness is a limited commodity in this world, that the more someone else has, the less is going to be for me, or I have nothing and I will forever. And they have everything and they will forever. So there's several problems with that. It's unlikely I have absolutely nothing. I may have nothing much I pay attention to or are grateful for, but it's not nothing. And it's very unlikely they have everything as well. Plus, nothing is forever. So part of the development of sympathetic joy is usually challenging a bunch of assumptions. And then the last quality after loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy is equanimity. Here it is again, in another context. And in this context, it's really bringing in the voice of wisdom. It's not relating, and mindfulness, just as a context, is relating to what's happening in such a balanced way that wisdom has room to arise. In the context of, say, compassion, it's what you want accompanying the compassion all along the way. You want wisdom. And the way wisdom manifests is equanimity, it's balance. It's important to try, and I'm not in control of the universe. I will do everything I can, and I can't make someone better on my timetable. And a lot of people, if you fall into the equanimity means inertia camp, then it feels like, oh, that means you're going to give up. That means you're not going to try. But I think if any of us looked at those times we have given up, it's not from an excess of balance, or wisdom. It's because we're frustrated. We're impatient. We cannot believe nothing has changed in this time frame. We feel thwarted, whatever it might be. The balance, the wisdom is actually what helps keep us going. So whenever we're really talking about something like compassion, we're also talking about equanimity, bringing in wisdom. We want perspective on things. Doesn't mean you failed because someone didn't leap to their feet and get better by Tuesday night. It really doesn't. And sometimes it is such a long time. When we opened the retreat center, the Insight Meditation Society, it was a long time ago. It was 1976. And so within a month, we received 2 letters that were remarkable for how they were addressed. The first, instead of being addressed to the Insight Meditation Society, was addressed to the Instant Meditation Society. And I really liked that. I thought, well, isn't that typical? Like something's got to work instantly or it's not worth it. But the second envelope quickly became my favorite. And that is, instead of being addressed to the Insight Meditation Society, it was addressed to the Hindsight Meditation Society. And I thought that is perfect. Because there have been so many times in my meditative life where I thought nothing was happening, only for me to look back later and realize, oh, something was happening. And there have been so many times in my life of trying to make a difference or caring about someone or the world where I thought, well, that went nowhere. Only when I'm lucky to get feedback later. And it could be exactly what I described. You gave me that book, didn't mean anything to me. Now, I've lost my job, or I've got this great opportunity opening up in front of me and I feel nervous, and I picked up the book and it was perfect so many times. And so I'm a great believer in the Hindsight Meditation Society. And as IMS, as we call it, has gone on through these years, first of all, of course, people stop writing by and large in envelopes. So the only one other that I think we've gotten in all these years was addressed instead of to the Insight, INSIGHT Meditation Society. It was addressed to the Insight, INCITE Meditation Society. So that was kind of interesting too. But as all these years have gone by and we've had these significant anniversaries, every time I've asked the organizers of the party, let's make cups that say Hindsight Meditation Society. Let's make t-shirts that say Hindsight Meditation Society. And every time they say no. So a recent, I think it must have been the 45th anniversary of IMS, they said no again, but these friends made me. I'm not home in Barrie now, I'm in New York City. Otherwise, I'd show you one of my many cups that say Hindsight Meditation Society, because I got a special gift and it's a great reminder. We need equanimity. We need some balance, which means in this context, we need insight. We need wisdom. We want wisdom to permeate our loving relations, loving efforts, compassionate efforts. Because otherwise, loving kindness itself becomes classically what's called attachment. It's a little difficult for us with Western psychological attachment theory, but when we talk about attachment in this context, it's like control, wanting to keep someone from changing, wanting to keep a circumstance from changing, holding on, grasping. It's never good. It's not attachment in the sense of nurturing or bonding or coming close to. It's a very different sense of the word. And that's what loving kindness becomes. It's what one of my friends once called loving kindness with an edge. It is like, as many of you know, we do loving kindness meditation with the silent repetition of certain phrases. So it becomes like, may you be happy by Tuesday night. I've got a long list of people to make happy, and you may be at the top of the list now, but you're not going to be at the top of the list forever. And speaking of lists, here's your list of everything you need to change in your life to be happy, as I see it. And so one of the ways of understanding the first three qualities, loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy, is that they are practices of generosity. They're gift giving, they're offering. And like any kind of generosity, it could be a freely given gift, or there could be a big agenda, lots of strings attached. I'll give you this if you give me that, or if you thank me properly, or if. And so the presence of wisdom is what allows loving kindness to be a freely given gift. It allows compassion and sympathetic joy to be freely given gifts. So it may be kind of quiet in the background, but it's something that we definitely want